So could you just clarify what it means to be a bean breeder?
Yeah, that's what I call my typical airplane conversation. What do you do? And I tell them, I'm a breeder. What is a breeder? And then I tell them, well, do you know what a dog breeder is? So, yeah, okay, I do the same one with beans.
Dr. Juan Osorno, I am so excited to be doing a bean interview with you. Thank you for accepting. Over the last couple years, I have really learned a lot from you about the important work of bean breeders and also about beans around the world. So we've traveled to several countries together,
Yeah.
and you always do such a great job of showing me wonderful local bean dishes and sharing that enthusiasm. Plus, I think I owe you my life because in one presentation in the Dominican Republic, I probably would have died of frostbite because they had the AC turned down to I don't even know what temperature, and you lent me your coat. So I'm also thankful for that.
Yeah, I
But on
remember
that
that.
note, yeah, exactly. I was shaking and you saved me. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
On that note, would you like to introduce yourself and share your name, your title, all that good stuff?
So my name is Juan Osorno. I'm the driving breeder for North Dakota State University. I've been here since 2007, being the driving breeder. My other life, besides being the breeder, is to teach genetics. I teach genetics every other year. I'm teaching this semester actually. Uh, I'm to 170 students. I'm teaching genetics, so it's quite interesting that a plant scientist or a plant geneticist can teach genetics to the whole audience here in campus because genes are genes, right? They are the same for humans, plants, animals, microorganisms. So, yeah.
Well, you're such a fantastic presenter. I'm a little bit jealous of your students. So I'm glad that you can be teaching them.
Well,
But
sometimes they sleep too.
no, that's when you have to throw things at them, right? Exactly. Bring beans in your pockets, pelt them
Yeah.
with beans. It'll
Hey, that's
solve
a good idea.
everything.
That's a good idea.
So before we go any further, I want to clarify for folks what a bean breeder is. Because sometimes when I say a bean breeder, people think, oh, it's GMO, it's genetic engineering and everything. But actually, you're using traditional bean breeding methods, traditional breeding. These are not GMO beans. So could you just clarify what it means to be a bean breeder?
Yeah, that's what I call my typical airplane conversation. What do you do? And I tell them, I'm a breeder. What is a breeder? And then I tell them, well, do you know what a dog breeder is? So, yeah, okay, I do the same one with beans. And then people kind of get it right away, right? Because, yeah, we know more about dogs than beans. Uh, but you're right. In the case of dry beans, there are technical reasons and there are also uh, cultural or economic reasons for not having uh, GMO dry beans, right? In general, the technical aspect, the dry bean doesn't like transformation, doesn't like genetic transformation, which is the technique or the tool that we use to do the GMOs. You can get the transformation, but it's really hard to grow beans out of a petri dish. They don't like it. So there are technical reasons for that. This doesn't happen as easy as in other crops. And then our industry in general and our consumers, they have stated that they are not interested in GMO products, right? So following that decision from the industry and the consumer side, uh, we try to stay away from those things, at least for now. There are some interesting tools as gene editing. Those are newer tools that I would like to try to implement maybe in the future. But for now, yeah, everything we do is just a conventional way of doing things, making crosses. You take pollen from one flower, move it to another flower from another variety, and you create a population, and then you start selecting out of that population, right? That's just almost the same way Mother Nature does it all the time.
Exactly. Thanks for explaining that. And so kind of going from there, what is a day in the life of a bean breeder look like? So maybe
Oh,
you're doing some
yeah.
of that, but general kind of explanation. What are you up to?
Well, it varies a lot across the year because, again, it's quite interesting. We follow the cycle of a plant, right? So a plant needs to be planted, a seed needs to be planted. It grows, it flowers, it produces pods, and then it gets ready for harvest, right? So that cycle takes about 90 to 100 days normally. That's the life of a bean, right? So we kind of depending on the season that we are in, we're doing different activities. If it's the summer, if it's the growing season, we start planting in May and harvesting in August, more or less. Late May, early June, we plant, and then we're harvesting in August for the most part. September for the most part. So we're really busy in the field, just doing field trials, testing our varieties. But think about the breeding program as a pipeline where you're constantly moving genetic material, because every year, right now, we just finished like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we finished making crosses in the greenhouse, right? That's where I was telling you about the pollen and the flower, and then you get your first generation. And then that goes into the field. So that's why I tell you that every season has different activities. If we're in the field, we're doing different things versus if we're in the greenhouse, or if we're in the lab, or if we're in Puerto Rico doing our winter nurseries when there is a lot of snow here and we cannot grow anything, right, in North Dakota. So it's quite diverse. By the time you're getting tired of doing one thing, usually you have to switch to another one, which is great, right? Because it's not like you're doing the same job all over the year, all the time. So every year we're making new crosses, new combinations, feeding that pipeline with new material. And then you kind of get into an interesting cycle of you cross, you evaluate, and then you select. And then you go back and do crosses, you evaluate, you select, right? And during that selection, you are pretty much eliminating the material that you think that are not going to work for the reasons that you're looking for, or the traits that you're looking for. So it's a constant recycling of these actions that happens across multiple generations, right? So we call the first generation is that one that where you made the mating of the female flower and the male flower, and then from there we start talking about F1 or generation 1, F2, F3, F4, and sometimes by the time we're releasing a variety, we're probably by F10. So that means that plant has been able to survive our selective eyes during 10 generations and has been tested and retested, and it's proving to have something worth keeping or having, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting process. Like you said, it's constantly changing depending on season. So I imagine that could be fun, sometimes overwhelming, but fun. And I know you are based in North Dakota, but you also, like you said, you have that nursery in Puerto Rico. I know you travel internationally. So what are some of the main varieties of beans or other pulses that you're working with?
So my main job, right, is to be the bean breeder for North Dakota and Minnesota. So North Dakota, as you know, is the largest producer of dry edible beans in the U.S. About 40% of the U.S. total comes from here. So it's an important crop. I mean, we're not as big as soybeans or wheat or corn, but in North Dakota, we're important, right? We're kind of the big fish in the small pond, right? And uh, Minnesota also, it's like the third largest producer. So when you put together, the two neighbor states, we call the MNDAC region, right? Minnesota, Dakota. You have about 60% of the total U.S. production of dry beans. Mostly in North Dakota, it's mostly pinto, navy, and black. And then you pass to Minnesota across the border, and then it's kidneys is the number one. Actually, 50% of the kidney bean production happens in Minnesota. So it's a really important market class for them. So I would say those four classes are kind of our main core efforts: pinto, navy, black, kidney. But we also do a little bit of work on small reds and pinks and gray Northerns. Right? And then within kidneys, you have three subclasses, because you have the dark red kidneys, the light red kidneys, and the white kidneys, right? So if you think about it, we work with about 9 market classes, right? That's kind of both a curse and a blessing, right? Because it's nice to work with all that diversity, but at the same time, we have to keep all these things kind of segregated, separated by market class. Our expectations for what a kidney does are different than the expectations we have for for a for a pinto, for example. It's the same. I mean, your expectations for a Ferrari are different than your expectations for a little Toyota Corolla, right? So kind of the same thing, right? Yeah, they all have their
Exactly.
strengths and their weaknesses. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, I'm a car person, Juan, so I can definitely relate to that
Some
statement.
people are car people, so yeah, they probably understand my analogy. Yeah,
They
yeah,
followed better than I did. Yeah, exactly. No, but it's a great point, and you work with a lot of really important beans, right? Those are big. People love those types of beans. They're grown a lot there, so really important in the food system. And
yeah.
you kind of hinted at maybe some challenge, right? Like it's hard to work with, it's a blessing and a curse to work with that many. But what are some other challenges that bean breeders may face?
Well, for sure, funding, right? It's being a public crop. You don't have the big companies, the Bayers, the Cortivas, the BASF companies putting really a lot of money into bean research. Uh, they don't think it's a good return on their investment or something. I don't know the reasons for it. But anyway, it remains mostly a public crop when it comes down to research and development, right? So universities and public programs like mine are very important for that. However, being a smaller crop and a smaller community, we have much more limited resources than many of the bigger crops. Yet we're expected to perform at the same level, right? Again, going back to expecting that little Toyota Corolla is going to beat the Ferrari in a speed test, right? Uh, so yeah, that's kind of one of the major limitations. It's a small group, so it's a small community. That's good and bad because we're really close together. We have to in order to be successful, but at the same time, there are not enough numbers to be able to do or tackle different problems and different things. So I end up being kind of a jack of all trades, trying to figure out so many things in so many directions, and it's hard sometimes to focus, right, and make sure that you don't lose your north. And then these are the important things that you need to focus on in order to make the crop better and successful. Uh, Beans are sensitive to many diseases. That's an issue. They're sensitive also to drought and flooding, and so we as breeders are constantly trying to come up with genetic solutions for those stressors that are limiting productivity and yields, right? uh, I will say that's probably the most important factors of limitations for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. You're working with a lot of different factors, some challenges, but bean breeding has had in the last few years, over the last few decades, some really big wins. So I know, yield is one of those, different
Yeah.
resistance and everything. But do you want to talk about maybe some of the big success stories so that people who are listening and have funding available know where to send it?
Yeah. Send it my way, right? uh, yes, I think not only on beans, but I think overall in many crops, we have been able, thanks to breeding, we have been able to increase productivity. In other words, we're producing more food in that same acre of land today than what we were doing 50 or 100 years ago. I mean, there is plenty of data that proves that in beans, today we're producing twice the amount of beans in that same acre than 100 years ago. I think that's huge, right? We doubled the production in 100 years. And I'm not saying it's all thanks to breeding, but breeding is a big component of that, right? Being able to improve the genetics behind those varieties that we're putting there. Uh, we also, especially here in the US and in this region, we have been able to do dramatic changes in what we call the plant architecture, the architecture of the plant. 40 years ago, the beans that we used to commercially produce were kind of all laying low in the ground, kind of flat, pods touching the ground, rotting, germinating. I mean, there were so many issues with that. Thanks to breeding, we were able to kind of change the shape of the plant. And now what we are growing today are more like upright plants, like little shrubs with the pods a little bit more higher off the ground. All the harvest is done mechanically, right, with big combines. So these combines come and pretty much cut at the base of the stem and are able to feed all those pods and all those plants into the combine to be threshed. So minimum losses in quality and yield, and so that's another big contributor to the increases in yields that we have seen. Right, it's just making sure that those pods are going to be captured by the equipment that we're using. Uh, Big improvements in disease resistance. We have now resistance to many viral diseases, fungal diseases, bacterial diseases that were really problematic many years ago, and now we have varieties that are pretty much protected from it. And guess what? It's for free, right? Genes are free. We just release the variety, it contains that gene that confers resistance to something, and now because of that, you probably don't need to apply as much fungicide as you used to. This is more sustainable, more ecological, right? So there's a lot of benefits out of just using simple genetics to solve some of these problems. What else? Changes in quality, uh, nutritional quality, but also visual quality. We have been able to do a lot of interesting things about that. Uh, yeah, those are the ones that I kind of come to the top of my head uh, right away as really important findings. Again, not only on beans in some cases, but also in many other crops, thanks to breeding. Yeah.
Those are huge wins. It's amazing what you can do with genes. And I know one time when I was listening to you present, you showed kind of that chart where it showed tracking of how yield has increased over the last 100 years. And that's really powerful, right? That's
Yeah.
important for sustainability, for food and nutrition security, just on a lot of different levels.
Exactly, and it makes you feel good as a breeder that you're accomplishing something. You are helping to feed the world somehow, and yeah, creating more food
Yeah.
and hopefully cheaper for everybody. Right.
You're making a difference. And speaking of ways that you've made a difference, I have heard you present multiple times. Like I said, you're a great presenter. I've heard you,
Thank you.
threaten's a strong word, but you've encouraged people to engage or answer questions or something. Otherwise, you'll start dancing or you'll start speaking Spanish. Depending on the audience, you choose your threats to be relevant. So that's
Yes.
always nice. But some of the topics I've heard you speak to, I want to ask about now. And one of those is slow darkening pintos. So if you could kind of explain why you are excited to be working with those and some of the benefits you're seeing from them.
So again, imagine you being the consumer. You go to the supermarket, right, to buy beans that you're gonna cook at home, pinto beans specifically, or even cranberry beans sometimes, right? You go to the supermarket and you're gonna try to pick the bag that has the lightest colored beans somehow because your perception is that those beans are more fresh. They're just recently harvested and they're gonna cook faster. They are gonna be all the good stuff for you, right? Rather than if you see a bag of dark beans, you're gonna be like, those probably have been in the shelf for too long. I don't know when they were grown, etc., etc. So that same perception happens for farmers. When they see darker pinto beans, they think it's old seed that is not going to do well in their fields. It's going to have germination issues, quality issues. So same deal. So there is a natural gene in beans that actually delays that darkening process, right? Uh, and then there is a lot of research that has been done to understand what is the biochemical function of that gene. It's related to something we know as polyphenols or flavonoid compounds in the seed. It's really cool stuff that we do in collaboration with other colleagues. Uh, and so we started using that gene, right? Making the cross of, okay, this one is a slow darkening, so I want to transfer that into another bean, another pinto bean. The problem with the original source of the gene is that it was not very productive. It was kind of one of those squat little plants. A lot of agronomic issues. So it's like how do you transfer just your gene of interest into something that is a little bit more productive and is something that growers will say, hey, I like that because it's as good as whatever I have growing in my farm right now. That's the challenge always, right? And so we were able to work on that for several years. In 2016, we released our first slow darkening pinto variety in collaboration with a colleague from USDA, Dr. Phil Miklas, and it was. I mean, everybody was excited. I mean, this is going to be a game changer for the industry and everything. And then it was interesting to see that there was actually some apprehension from some people in the industry because they just simply didn't know how they were going to handle this, right? I think that has changed across the years. Today, about 40% of the pinto acreage in North Dakota is grown with slow darkening pintos. It's a whole industry that kind of embraced that and use it, and they're happy. You and I were in the Dominican Republic. They eat pintos there, and they love slow darkening pintos. One of the things that we found out later working with the colleagues and things like that, and again, this is, I call it more of a breeding accident, right? It's not something that, oh, we know this is going to happen, so we're going to do it. It was more like finding after the fact that we were moving this gene into commercial material. They also found that they cook faster than regular pintos. So savings in time and energy, right? Really important deal in places in Central America and Africa where they still cook with wood, for example. And also, more interestingly, they actually have more bioavailable iron. What that means? It means that when you measure iron, the iron content in that seed, the content is the same between regular pintos and slow darkening pintos. But when you measure how much that iron is in the chemical correct form to be absorbed by our stomachs and our guts and our intestines, the slow darkening pintos have like 7 times more bioavailable. So voila, right? Now you have a bean that looks nice, cooks faster, and is more nutritious, right? I don't know what else you want, right? It's like, and then people complain about it. That's the funny thing, right? So I was surprised that I had people, uh, commercial kitchens, canners. It's like they call me and say, your slow darkening beans are getting mushy. Yeah, that's because you don't need to keep them in the stove for that long. You have an opportunity to save time and energy and all these things. And yeah, it's been quite interesting the journey of working with food companies on these things and make them realize that this is an opportunity, right? But yeah, interesting story overall. I've been trying to repeat this story many times, get people excited, and it's slowly getting traction. We'll see. You're helping me doing that too, so yeah. Hmm.
Well, I was so excited when you shared about it because it's wins for nutrition, it's wins for, farmers if the when we can build the demand, it's wins for sustainability, for human health.
I
If, for
know.
instance, you don't have to cook as much with wood in different regions,
It
like
checks so many boxes, right? Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
But
And you're
humans are
doing
weird. Then we start finding the black dot in the white sheet. So okay, go figure.
uh
Yeah,
human nature. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. And I
yeah.
know another important project that you've been working on is resistance to weevils. So, do you want to share a little bit about the weevil resistance work that you've been doing?
This is a little bit more newer, more recent, but it's extremely exciting. I mean, as exciting as this deal about the slow darkenings. Uh, and again, all the credit doesn't go just to me. That's one nice thing about breeders is that we all stand in the shoulders of our predecessors. They were breeders previous to me that did a lot of interesting work finding sources of resistance to weevils, right? Uh, Big problem in tropical regions. We don't have it here in North Dakota because winter takes care of bugs really well here in North Dakota. I always tell people this is a sad place for an entomologist, right? Because people who work with insects, because there's not much going on in that. There, few exceptions here and there. Uh, but in the tropics, this is probably the number one post-harvest problem you have, right? You harvest your beans, you bring them into storage, you go back 3 months later and they're full of holes because of the larvae of the insect was just eating all the beans and everything. It looks like you almost took a shotgun and just shot the beans, right? And got all these little holes. We were able to use a source of resistance that actually was a lot of previous work done by some of my colleagues. Paul Kusolwa, Gene Beaver, Gene Myers were behind that, Tim Porch. And they were able to cross a kind of a cousin of beans known as tapary beans. They're grown in Mexico and southern U.S., southwest U.S. I mean, they still even grown in Arizona and places like that, New Mexico. Anyway, they were able to make crosses with this wild peppery bean, transfer that resistance into a dark red kidney bean, and that's the one we've been using to kind of transfer that into more commercial varieties. Again, same issue. The original source of resistance is it's not agronomically, it's not something that farmers will normally grow in their farms. So it's like how you transfer that gene of interest while at the same time getting rid of all the other traits that you don't want, right? Things like that. We call that linkage drag, right? With something good always comes something bad as well. So how do you get rid of that? Uh, and and we were able to do that in collaboration with a group in the University of Zambia in Africa. And we're happy to say that, yeah, we found several lines that are highly resistant. They are agronomically much more productive than the original source. They have nice color and size. That is the accepted types that they grow in Africa, which are very different from the types we grow here in the US, for example. I mean, it's amazing when you travel around the world. It's amazing to see all sorts of different types of beans people consume around the world, right? So yeah, we'll be probably releasing the first variety early next year, and it's gonna be. I mean, people in Africa are calling this a game changer, right? It's at that level, so everybody's really excited about it. I'm happy to be able to be part of that, help the University of Zambia accomplish that, and see the impact, the potential impact that that's going to happen in the region, right?
Yeah, real world impact, and you're bringing those benefits for food security, and it's amazing what breeding can do. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been talking about colleagues both within the US, in multiple continents, right? I know you definitely do a lot of global work as well, although you're based in North Dakota in that Mindak region and obviously do so much there. What are some of the benefits of working with this kind of global team, a bean breeder team?
Oh, again, because it's a small community, we have to kind of work together. There is a really cool scientific network worldwide that I get to work with people that are really willing to share expertise, information, varieties, and material. That's what allow a breeder to be successful. If you don't exchange material with among each other, then you're doomed to just keep a closed loop system in which no new genetic variation is coming in and help you to become better. So yeah, for me it's one of the best thing about my job. I will say it's the people I have to work with. It's been pretty amazing. It's been an amazing journey. I worked in other crops before, and the experience I get in working in beans with the people I get to work and the way they work together is very unique. And I only see it in few other crops. And guess what? They're also kind of smaller crops. So that kind of it's a given. You have to do that because you're a small community, right?
Working together, and not that either of us are biased, but bean people are perhaps some of the best people you could say. So, and yeah, exactly. I think another benefit that I've heard you talk to a little bit is what about the timeline? So you said maybe 10 generations or something from when you start working with a bean to maybe when a farmer can grow it. I know that can vary, but how can working globally help kind of reduce the timeline for from when you start working with a variety to when it's ready to be grown in the field?
Yeah. So in our specific case here in North Dakota, we can only grow beans once per year, right? May to August, or late May, June to August, September. And if that was the case, if we're talking about it takes about 10 generations to develop a new variety, it would take me 10 years to do a new variety, right? Luckily, what we do is once we harvest here, we also send stuff down to tropical regions where you can have multiple generations per year. So we send stuff to New Zealand when this place is full of snow, and Puerto Rico. We used to do even Florida at one time, but we stopped doing that. Uh, so that allows to do 2 cycles per year, right? So now we're going twice the speed for the process, right? We only do that for the first 5 generations because then after the fifth generation, it's all about testing and the testing has to be done in our environment. So, I mean, it's cool to know that your variety is doing well in Puerto Rico, but that's not my target environment, right? I work for the environment of North Dakota. So all the testing after the fifth generation happens here in North Dakota. But those first five generations, I save about 2 to 3 years just by moving things back and forth in between places. So yeah, it's very useful. I was there 2 weeks ago, uh, precisely just doing my selections and deciding that some of the things actually don't get harvested, don't get back. Some of them, that's the end of the road. Some others, they continue that churning selection process that I was just talking about, right?
Yeah, hugely helpful for reducing that time and then
Yeah,
making sure that seed is available for farmers to grow
exactly.
sooner.
So now
And
instead of 10 years, now you talk about more like 7 years, 8 years. Yeah.
right, a
Hmm.
big noticeable difference. And you said obviously that you're focusing in the environment that you're in, and I believe you do some on-farm research too. So do you want to talk about maybe some of the benefits or reasons that you like doing on-farm research working with growers?
So just for the sake of your audience, the understanding of your audience, as a breeder, you have two options. You can do a lot of field trials and experiments in uh, stations or research stations that are part of the university system, right? And then you also have farmers fields, commercial farmers fields, where you can also do some of that research. In my case, I have a balance of things where at least 70% of my trials are actually in farmers fields, and the other 30% is on university research stations, right? I love getting out of the research station environment because, in a way, it's a little bit artificial, right? We try to pamper things too much and take care of. So, versus when you go to the farmer's field, you are exactly under the same conditions as they are, right? It's a beautiful opportunity for selection and testing under their conditions uh, with the same treatment that they do for their commercial fields. So I really love that. But the part I really love most is the interaction with the farmers. Because when I'm there taking my notes, doing work, harvesting, whatever, in many cases they show up. They see me there, they show up. And that's an opportunity for a conversation on one to one, right? Where they are telling me what they're struggling with, what are the issues, what are the good things that they're having during the season, uh, what are their projections. I mean, so many things. You can even get philosophical if you want. Uh, but for me, I crave that. Without that one to one interaction with farmers or people from the industry, uh, it's very hard to understand what you need to focus on. So it kind of gives me a good north in a way to understand, okay, I really need to focus on this, or it looks like there is a new emerging issue that I need to keep an eye on or keep it on my radar. Uh, it helps you to prioritize on your breeding program again because we get pulled in so many directions that it's very easy to get dispersed and get too distracted with too many things.
Right. It keeps you in sync with the challenges and also the successes that people are experiencing. So I think really
Exactly.
important. And I've
Exactly.
met several growers in the Mindak region. They're great folks. So
Yes.
it's also fun, like you said, right? Those person
Exactly.
to person interactions. And so Juan, you've shared a lot already, and I'm gonna ask you about your favorite bean dish or one of your favorites. It may be at home or it may be when you're traveling, whatever the case may
Uh-huh.
be. But before I get into recipes and what you like to eat, I want to give you space and time if there's anything else you wanted to add. I feel like we've gone through a little mini genetics course and we understand bean breeding, so
Hopefully,
no
it wasn't too
obligation.
boring.
No, are you kidding? Did you see me? I was excited the whole time. So, anything else you want to add before we talk a little bit of bean dishes that we like to eat?
Oof. Uh, no, I think you did a good job covering mostly everything that needs to be covered. I think people need to realize, especially consumers, need to realize that almost on any crop, even in a small crop like dry beans, you have all these value chain, right? That it's behind the product that you're buying. Uh, that does a lot of try to do a lot of good things for your product for what you're trying to get. Uh, I consider myself in a very interesting and privileged position as a breeder because it's like you are at the very beginning of that value chain, right? And the changes you do at this point are going to trickle down and affect each one of those value chain members, or slabs that you have there. So it's quite interesting once you release a variety to see how that goes into the whole food system and the whole chain, all the way to the consumer, right? It's yeah, it's very fulfilling. It's very yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Hugely rewarding, I would imagine. It's your baby. You've been working with it for a long time, and finally there it is.
I always tell people. Someone asked me the other day, "What is your best day at the office?" It's like when a farmer tells me, "I love your variety." Right? That's the best day in the office. Or a consumer or a company comes and tells you, we're really doing really well with your variety. It's like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly what I did all this work for 7 or 10 years trying to come up with that variety, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the moment. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for sharing so that people have a better understanding of that. And it doesn't have to be with your varieties, it could be with any varieties, but if you want to share one of, it's way too hard to pick a favorite for bean people, but what's one of your favorite bean dishes?
Well, I'm originally from Colombia, so I have to say that I grew up eating a lot of local. There's a local market class in Colombia known as cargamanto beans. You probably have seen it. Oh, we got them. Yeah, we got them in Medellin one time. So yeah, so that's probably my favorite. As a matter of fact, my parents are coming in 2 weeks, and I already told them you need to bring some of that stuff here because yeah, I want it. Uh, but I mean, after working on beans for different years, I know people say beans are beans. They all taste the same and blah, blah, blah. After doing this for many years, I can tell the little subtle differences, right? The taste, the texture, the flavors, uh, yeah, the spices that we use in different places. Bean leaves. I mean, in Zambia, I ate bean leaves as cooked bean leaves, and they were amazingly good. Uh, yeah, people use the straw to feed animals. Uh, there's so many things. Mooncakes in Asia made with bean paste. They're so versatile. It's amazing. Yeah. We had what was it? The bean dessert in Dominican Republic. Remember that in the little cup? That was amazing. It was like a little what was it, like a parfait kind of thing. Yeah.
Really
Uh,
good. Yeah.
yeah,
Very
I've been able
innovative.
to just taste so many types of beans and flavors and things like that. I also, because I did a lot of work in Central America, the small red beans in Nicaragua or Honduras, they are amazingly good. Or El Salvador, yeah, those are also my favorites. So yeah, we can keep talking about bean dishes and recipes for hours. Yeah.
For somebody who maybe couldn't get cargamanto beans because they're not in Colombia or they don't have family visiting soon to bring them, which I'm jealous.
I
What's
should probably
maybe
put an Amazon website and start selling them, right? Yeah.
I think you should. But until that's in place, what are some other varieties that are maybe similar to cargamanto?
You could replace cargamantos with cranberries. They are pretty similar, I would say. Cargamantos tend to be bigger and rounder, but I say that's probably a close replacement for sure. I know in some ethnic stores, Goya sometimes can sell cargamanto beans in packages, so you can find them there. Yeah, but cranberries will be probably the closest thing that we can find in the U.S. and still be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a fantastic bean. And any particular dish that you like to make with them or would recommend people try?
For me, the perfect marriage is any beans and rice. That's for me, the whole food in the world can disappear and I can survive just in rice and beans. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
It's a pretty perfect combo, I agree. So
Also,
Juan, if somebody
nutritionally speaking, right?
exactly. Yeah, complementation of protein there and so delicious and nutritious. What more can
Yeah.
you want?
Yeah.
And Juan, if somebody were to come to you and say, "All right, I want to start eating more beans," what is a really easy go-to bean dish that I could try? I mean, maybe beans and rice would be your answer because that's a good one too, but any other just quick, easy, tasty go-to bean dishes that you might recommend to someone?
Well, again, I'm probably old school in that way. I like my beans just in a typical bean stew, right? The way we do it, we just pressure cook them at home and do it. And sometimes I put some in the freezer for using them later, right? Things like that, kind of having a stock. Uh, I think I like putting them in salads too. Just getting a can of beans when you're preparing a salad. Just adding a can of beans into your salad adds a lot of interesting textures and flavors to your salad. Plus, you're getting the protein, right? Uh, so I've been doing that a lot with black beans and dark red kidney beans lately. Just adding them to my salads. Uh, Other than that, no, I think I'm pretty old school. I know there is all this new revolution about plant-based proteins. Uh, I would like to see more products made with beans, right? We get a lot of products made with peas or soybeans, but hopefully the market picks up and starts using more dry beans to get some of these products and recipes out there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And well, and I love the point of a bean salad. Doesn't get much easier, right? Just add some beans and there you go. And so, last question. Where can people find out more about the amazing work that you're doing?
Well, I'm not a huge media guy, okay? You know that, Chelsea. So I usually rely on you to tell the stories of the things that we're doing. I don't have a little huge online presence or things like that. We used to have a website in our university website, but I know they made some changes, and right now it's not available. We're working on it. There is a bunch of YouTube videos that we have done across the years about what we do and how we do it. There is a really interesting 8-minute video about that breeding process that we were just talking about. That's something you can probably link later, things like that. Uh, yeah, my farmers group, my commodity group is doing a video about the drive-in breeding program as we speak right now. So that's going to be an interesting product later.
You're very modest, but you do incredibly important work. And it sounds like that video with North Harvest Bean Growers Association, when that comes out, maybe we can add that too so folks can look for that. And maybe it'll include, gosh, anywhere from you in the greenhouse to in North Dakota, Minnesota to in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Juan, I can't thank you enough. I love talking to you. I always learn something new from you. Thank you for joining today and sharing about the really, really
Well, my
important and
pleasure
impactful
again. As
work.
I always tell you, thanks for helping us to tell the story about the things that we do. I always tell people breeders are kind of behind the curtains. People don't necessarily see the work that we're doing, but it's of huge impact, right?
It really is. So we're opening the bean curtain, sharing a bit about that work, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that. Yeah.